Good morning, Foundry, and welcome to our online service. We are so happy that you've decided to spend this time with us today. As you may know, this coming Wednesday is Ash Wednesday, which is the traditional start of Lent. Lent is a 6-week-long season on the church calendar where we prepare our hearts to celebrate Easter. Through reflection and prayer and fasting, we take stock of our lives, of our sin, and of our great need for a Savior so that we can better understand and appreciate the mercy and grace of God shown to us in Jesus. So this Wednesday, February 17th, we are going to observe Lent in 2 different ways. Earlier in the day, from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m., we'll open the church for guided prayer. We've divided that time up into 25 minute slots, which you'll need to register for at foundrybaltimore.com/Ash Wednesday. And later that evening, we'll have an online worship service at 7 p.m. that you can participate in from home. As you well know, this has been an incredibly difficult year for so many of us. And because of your continued generosity, the Foundry has been able to help those hardest hit, both in our church and in our neighborhood. There are 3 ways to give financially here at the Foundry. You can give online through the My Church app and through the mail. And if you're curious about specific ways that you can partner with the Foundry in being generous to our city, check out foundrybaltimore.com/how-to-help. And you can see some of the things that the Foundry has been up to and how you can help too. We're going to conclude our series, A Better Kingdom, today. And as we do that, let's begin by worshiping together as Liza leads us in a song about our better King, Jesus.
Every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There
Hey Foundry, as you can see here, we are getting into the Valentine's Day spirit. That's because if you're watching live, it's February 14th, and it is this holiday that we call Valentine's Day. And I want you just to make a little journey with me for a moment. I want you to assume for a minute that the items on this table are items that you were given this particular February 14th by a special someone. That they gave you the little bear with the Hershey Kisses and the cute little Happy Valentine's Day balloon, and then you found yourself with a heart-shaped box of chocolates, not just the Whitman sampler, but there's some good truffles or Rebs candy in Baltimore, which is the real deal. And if you don't know, now you know. They went with a dinner. They made you dinner, and they threw in some Old Bay hot sauce because it's beautiful and it's wonderful and it's everything that is Valentine's Day. They burned you a CD like it's 1998, so you got the Casey and JoJo on lock, and then you get to open the card and you think it's going to contain just a really kind message that is a heartfelt expression of all of these gifts. But rather than that, it says this. It says, hey, on this Hallmark-driven holiday, these are gifts that everyone tells me are supposed to make you happy, so I hope you like them. I hope it helps us stay together, despite the fact that I don't always say I love you, and I have not always been faithful. But as I have crushed, nay, exceeded the cultural expectations placed upon me this Valentine's Day, I do hope that the requests that I make to you over dinner will be humbly considered best. Right? The only thing missing from that is an invitation to their LinkedIn profile, right? There's something, we know that by reading that there's a disconnect between the gifts that are being given and the fundamental assumptions that are being made about love, that there's something contractual versus something covenantal. For 64 chapters, the message of Isaiah is to try and separate the contractual picture of God's love that's being projected onto him and presenting God and the covenantal hope of the kingdom of God in contrast. And so here's the point of these 64 chapters that we've been wrestling with over the course of these past 6 weeks. That loving God and being loved by God is not merely participation in religious rituals. That it's not participation in nationalistic civil religion, just how we participate in Valentine's Day because it's something we do in the United States. There's some of us that maybe have that understanding of what it means to follow God. What do we have to do to keep God in our good graces? What are the things, the dates that we have to make sure that we're at church or we watch a stream? That just like Valentine's Day is not about the pressure of being smooth-talked by leaders who promise power or don't have your best, but ultimately don't have your best interest in mind. That we in Jesus are given a king and a kingdom who aims to set us free from those who actually want to take something from us. That there is a better king and a better kingdom that has come to transform our reductionist pictures of love, and it is available to you and to me. And as we embrace that, it's transformational. It's transformational to our hearts as we experience forgiveness and grace. But then as we understand that better, it doesn't move us to just live out good religious practice in private pursuit. That the tail end of the book of Isaiah moves the follower to embody the heart of this servant king, to be a picture of justice where love and hope is fractured by the world, by all of these other things that we've mentioned in the above part, right? Isaiah 61 is our text today. And the big idea of our time together is that there is a kingdom of love and justice available to us. Something better than the chocolates and the teddy bears and the nationalistic civil religion. That the real heart of God is this. Isaiah 61 verses 1-3. The Spirit of the sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to provide for those who grieve in Zion, and to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. This word of proclamation says that this servant king is going to do 7 things, that he's going to bring good news to the poor, that there's going to be a king that sees and identifies with not the powerful, not the exploiters, but those who have been exploited, those who are lowly and meek, that God sees them. That there's going to be a binding up of the brokenhearted, that it's not just going to be about a kingdom of healing physical wounds, but those of us who have heart wounds can be engaged and empathized with by the way in which this king serves us. That those of us who have been physically overpowered or have been exploited in some way, have been held captive by structures or sin or addiction, can find a sense of liberty. That there'll be an opening of prison for those who are bound, that there'll be second chances to those who have felt the sting of consequence of this world, that there'll be the proclamation of the year of the Lord's favor, a reference back to this idea of Jubilee in Leviticus 25, when systems of structure and structures of oppression and selfishness were reset in the way laid out by God for Israel. That this king will announce a day of judgment, which might sound kind of weird to us. We don't like to think about that idea. That feels a little strange. But it's rooted in the idea that God will not ignore injustice. For example, this is the belief of Fannie Lou Hamer in the early 60s as part of the civil rights movement. Fannie Lou Hamer was in the Deep South boycotting, the bus boycotts, trying to stand up for equality for all when she was jailed. And in this particular jail, she was beaten, she was assaulted, she was horribly mistreated in a way that had lasting physical and emotional trauma for Fannie Lou Hamer. And one of the statements she made to one of her police officers who jailed her, who beat her, was this. She said, "Do you people ever think or wonder how you'll feel when the time comes where you'll have to meet God?" What's she saying? That she might not have the power in that moment. She might not have the physical strength or the authority to bring punishment in that moment, but that the thing that she'd experienced was not unseen by God. And that just because there was not an immediate consequence, that didn't mean that there was not going to be a consequence. And that was where she was going to place her trust and continue to go on bravely fighting the good fight that God had called her to. That ultimately this will be a kingdom where there'll be comfort for those who are mourning, that there'll be people who grieve, but they will not grieve without hope. These are the essences, the message of what the sovereign Lord wants to do through this servant king, to take the crown of beauty instead of ashes, that God will make beautiful things from messes, that our mourning will turn to joy, that our spirit of despair will become a garment of praise, and that this little acorn that feels so fragile and frail becomes an oak of righteousness that will be on display for everyone around to see, that God will in fact not waste our hurt, that this kingdom of love and justice is available to us. Those of us who might feel brokenhearted, those of us who might feel bound by addiction, those of us who might feel the sting of systems and structures that have exploited us, those of us who are feeling mourning. You see, we make Christianity, we make following God about a lot of things. about following the rules, about looking the part, about going to X amount of church services. But what we see here and the hope of this passage is that this is the heartbeat of the servant king. This is what the kingdom of God is about, to step into the brokenness that you and I have experienced in us and around us, and ultimately paint a picture of hope. That those of us who call ourselves the Foundry are not to just have good religion and look the part, but to admit that we're addicted, afflicted, discouraged, that we feel discarded, and that we have felt forgotten, that we are not a people who are just trying to earn our good stars by good ethical behavior, that we are people who need God's presence breaking through the injustice and the hurt and the sting of this world. That's what it means to receive Jesus as King and as Lord, to long for that kingdom. And so today, if you're hearing that for the first time, I would invite you to continue to wrestle with or respond to that. You can go online to our digital connection card. You can look down at the comments, and if we can help you take a next step, or we can help you answer any questions that you might have about what it means to follow Jesus, we want to do that. If we can help you take a next step towards baptism, which is to say, hey, this is what I want to be about. I want to be about living out this kingdom that's described. Then go ahead and mark that on that digital connection card. And for those of us who are followers of Jesus, to wash ourselves in this, to be refreshed in this idea for all of the other things that we've made following Jesus to be about, and then connected to this, that the better kingdom that's being made available to us is not just one of invitation, but it's one of participation. That what we see here in this passage is as we talk about this glorious good hope in 61 verses 1 through 3, that we jump into verse 4 and we see what this beauty from ashes, what these oaks of righteousness are really about. Verse 4, that they'll rebuild ancient ruins and restore places long devastated. They'll renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Strangers will shepherd your flocks. Foreigners will work your fields and vineyards. And you will be called priests of the Lord. You will be named ministers of our God. You will feed on the wealth of nations, and in their riches you will boast. What's going on here? That those who understood the heart of this servant king, who want to be the ones that experience beauty from ashes, that they don't just sit there and go, oh, cool, well, we're invited, so let's have some church services. That they become participants, not just consumers. They become creative restorers. That they don't look at ruins around them and allow themselves just to play the blame game of well, that's someone else's fault, and I'm going to go build this subdivision. But rather they look at where there is fracture. They look at where systems and structures of injustice have perpetuated, and they don't just make blanket statements about it. They get their hands dirty. They step into and work with the community of people around them in a way that's even compelling to people who are outside of the fold. That they're not people who just listen to the experience of others and the fractures that have gone on, and they're like, prove it. Prove to me that's real. But they get into the restoration work, the renewal work, places that have been devastated for generations. That it's not enough for us to have hot takes and great commentary about what happened in Baltimore in a time that preceded us. But for those of us who call the Foundry our home, that we look at ourselves as not just people who have been invited to receive this good news and happen to live in Baltimore, but become people who are paying attention to how we can participate in bringing that hope, those 7 things that we talked about, to bear in the midst of the desolation, the hurt, the social, political, economic, spiritual unrest and disruption that may be in our midst. A good example of this is Brian Stevenson, who started the Equal Justice Initiative, who uses his gifts of law and his wisdom and acumen for law to step into places where there have been people who have been exploited by unjust systems, who may be innocent and have been punished, or may have been punished excessively for crimes that they committed, and he begins to advocate for them. He talks about getting close to suffering, that his ministry and in the Equal Justice Initiative is about getting close to suffering and allowing grace to fill the cracks. When we understand God's picture of justice, we don't just receive it, but we participate in it, which begs this question and calls us to this point of reflection. It says, is our picture of justice spirit-driven, right? If we go back to verse 1, the Spirit of the sovereign Lord is on me. That's the claim that ultimately in Luke chapter 4, Jesus will make. Hey, that's me. But if we are followers of Jesus and God's Spirit is living and dwelling in us, the question for us to reflect on, and don't answer it too quickly, is the picture of justice that we're carrying with us today, here, February 14th, or whenever you're watching this, does it reflect what's described here in Isaiah 61? Or has it been co-opted or fractured by the pain that we're feeling, the hurts that we've experienced, the ways in which that we've projected our own picture of justice onto God's picture of justice? If we're honest, none of us see God's picture of justice in full, and we need the Spirit of God's help because we're not Jesus. We need to see how our own sin, how our own need for grace can profoundly impact our understanding of justice. I like the way Tim Keller said it. He says, when we allow our heart's hope for justice to slide off Jesus Christ crucified and to let it rest in some program, group, or even our own efforts, we will become both self-righteous as well as despondent. And I know in 2020, I have found myself at times in both of those camps. I found myself at times going, I'm just so angry that the world cannot understand the pain that's being experienced over here. And at other times, I've been so despondent at the deep, pervasive brokenness of hurt around me that it's been hard to feel like I could even do anything to help it at all. This is what Keller's talking about. So we come back to this mission and heart of Jesus when we're confused, when we're frustrated, when we don't understand the scriptures, coming back to the heart of God and letting that picture of justice that we bring and project into our world be slowly changed and transformed by submitting it to the lordship of Jesus. How do we do that? We do it in three ways. Number one, we invite the Spirit to help us go inward. We talked about this last week, the idea of being willing to pray, God, search me and know me, test me and know my anxious thoughts. Help me to see my pain, my poverty, my mourning, my sin, how any of those things might be disrupting my picture of justice. Let me quote Brian Stevenson here. Fear and anger can make us vindictive and abusive, unjust and unfair until we all suffer from the absence of mercy and we condemn ourselves as much as we victimize others, right? That if we refuse to go inward, we will just live in that cycle of self-righteousness and despondency that so frequently marks our confrontation with injustice. And as we learned in Isaiah 58, what fasting and praying and reading the Bible and church and spiritual activities aim to do is to help us go inward, to help us see us for us, and to see Jesus for Jesus, and to see where the gaps need to be, where God's grace fills in the cracks, where God's mercy challenges us, where we are the younger brother who's been received by the good God who's run to us, where we've been the older brother in the prodigal narrative who's let self-righteousness carry us to a place of bitterness. We also then have to allow outward help. This message is not just written to you individually, but to us as a collective body of believers. who have different gifts and passions and story. And in this time, even in a time of scattering, the importance for us to pursue one another and to complement one another in this gifting, right? Part of the way that we'll be challenged to see if our picture of justice is spirit-driven is by getting into the lives of other believers and letting them share their story and letting them speak into our story so that we might help each other kind of fully grasp the picture of what God is doing in the world. Lastly, we move onward. We actually start somewhere. We decide where we'll engage right now. We don't obsess with what God is shaping in us for 10 years from now, but we take the places where we see injustice. We take the places where we see hurt and fracture, and we know that maybe we don't understand in full, but we just find a place right now where we can begin to engage and get our hands dirty. And as we do that, it moves us from hot takes and procrastination or ideologies without biographies and helps us to maybe even be refined in that journey. There's a good chance that there's something God has given you a passion for today. And one of the things that will skewer your picture of fighting that injustice and applying that passion is just procrastination. Paralysis by analysis. And so if you can begin to get into the story of where you feel that call or compelling invitation to let God's picture of justice be brought forth, one of the ways in which you'll be challenged is by actually going and doing that thing. In Luke chapter 4, as Jesus enters the synagogue, he unrolls this Isaiah 61 scroll, and he says, hey, this thing, it was about me. Because here's the deal. Our picture of love, our picture of justice isn't chocolates and teddy bears and cleverly orchestrated national holidays. It is Jesus, whose heart was broken on the cross, who was plunged into darkness on the cross, who got into the ashes so that we could have the crown of beauty, who was stripped and beaten so that we could experience the garments of praise, who became a victim of injustice, powerless, so that we could experience freedom and could be a picture of justice to the world. May you receive that beautiful invitation today, and may you walk in it as we walk with each other to look more and more like Jesus and to bring that picture of justice to the places where we live and work and play. Hey, Foundry, one of the hallmarks of the 40-day season that we're entering, the season called Lent, one of the hallmark practices of Lent is that idea of fasting. And the idea of fasting wasn't begun as like an invitation for participation trophies or gold stars. It was intended to create a time where the sacrificial love of Jesus is thought about, is participated in, and is prepared for by taking the time that a person might spend eating or drinking, and instead of doing that, to pursue prayer and reflection. And here in this season that we're in, we think this is such an important season in the life of our church, because the needs of our community, the reality of COVID, the inequities that we've been exposed to this year, all the while being scattered from one another, have really created an important tension for us, right? Will we go back to normal, or will we step into this new normal and figure out how to embody the love and grace and mercy of Jesus in humble and bold new ways? And so because of that tension, we want to invite you to, in this Lenten season, to join us in a season of prayer and fasting. For these 40 days, the Foundry is going to participate in what we're calling a weekday daytime fast, meaning that between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., we are asking all who call the Foundry their home and want to participate to take the time that they would spend eating or snacking during those daytime hours, Monday through Friday, and instead use those times strategically to pray, to reflect, both in what God is doing in their story and what God might be doing through our church. That we as a community would be overwhelmed by the beauty of Christ's love, to be renewed in our commitment to embody it, and to be united and creative in our approach so that we might express that love both individually and organizationally. So let me give you a couple of tips if you're interested in being a part of this. Number one, make a plan that works for you. Maybe you're going to drink water during the day. Maybe you're just going to abstain from solid food. Maybe you're going to close your laptop. Maybe you're going to take a walk at a strategic time of the day. Figure out a plan and a place and a space that helps you pull this off in a way that works for you. Number two, follow the Foundry's Instagram account, because every day the goal is not just to make you hangry, but to give you prompts and points of reflection so that you might pursue the heart of God, that you might hunger and thirst for God's heart for this moment. Number three, we want to invite you just to start. This might be really intimidating. Maybe you've never done something like this before, but we really think there's power in just committing yourself to the start. And then number four, try to stick with us over the course of these next 40 days. There might be logistical challenges. There might be days where you just can't really pull it off. There might be days where you intend to and then mess up along the way. But there's grace in this journey. The goal here isn't to get gold stars and participation trophies, but to be united in pursuing God's heart for this moment, for you and us at the Foundry together. And so we look forward to coming together in this way, and we do so in great anticipation for what God is going to do in and through our community in this season and the season to come.